Welcome to today's show. I am your host, Eric Darnley Small, and on today's show, I want to do something that I find very interesting. Sorry, I haven't been around and I haven't been able to put any videos together. Life happens, unfortunately, and it's one of those things. But I always appreciate any time you come, anytime you like and subscribe for the show, as well as tell anybody else that you might know that might enjoy a show such as this. It is not a traditional political show, I don't think. At least I'm trying not to make it that way. I'm trying to make it something that is very informative for those folks who don't normally go out and follow politics. I am hoping to catch some stories that folks may have missed because everybody's talking about all of the crazy stuff that's going on in the world of Trump. And not really paying attention on some of the stuff that's happening down the line. This show, strictly focuses on stuff from a progressive, liberal direction, but also talks about race. I talk about my father's training. He was a trainer for the New York City Police Department and told me and taught me a lot of the stuff that he knew. And I'll sometimes do shows about that. I also want to do stuff about international politics. I want to talk about the economy, business, and all that kind of stuff. But on today's show, I'm focused on what I think, and it has been a running theme on this channel, what I've said many a time, and that is what I think, instead of being a real concern, well, I don't want to minimize the concern for us as a country for the election and what's happening in politics. But I really think the story here is about the Republican Party and what's happening to it. We may see the party of Lincoln for the first time come apart and a new party be born. I think this is a time of change, of great change. And the media, I think, is really very almost schizophrenic about this, because the polling and what they claim to be, the polling is telling them is that the Republican Party, and in particular Donald Trump, is beating. They'll admit it's 50-50, but Donald Trump is ascendant, is beating. And you would think, if listening to that Donald Trump himself is going out and he's telling people that the Republican Party is stronger than ever. But there were two stories that came out recently that throw into question what is happening on the Republican Party, and it's quite striking, actually. And I think it's historic, and it's something that I think historians will look back at years from now. And it's two stories. One is out of the Washington Post, and the other is from the Atlantic. And I have to give some credit to the Bulwark, the folks at the Bulwark. They had George Packer, who is a name who is people have followed at all. Iraq, the war in Iraq. George Packer wrote some of the best writings on what happened in Iraq. Our invasion of Iraq. This is in '03. I think he writes a book on this that is a must read if you want to learn about what happened, what went right, and what went wrong. But anyway, he turns his focus on what's going on in the GOP, and he's looking at a specific state. Coincidentally, this weekend, the Washington Post, or last weekend, I should say, the Washington Post came out with a very fascinating article. And I wanted to highlight two of these things because I think that they sort of complement one another, these two stories. And the subject of today's video is, if you're worried about America, don't look to Trump. Look to the GOP. Look at the grand old party to find out and get an understanding about what's going on in America. And as I mentioned, I'm talking about Arizona. And the question is, have the GOP in Arizona gone mad? And I'm using that term "gone mad" sort of as a familiar term, but really what I'm talking about is the party coming apart? Is it breaking apart? And the two stories I'm talking about is George Packer's in the Atlantic, What Will Become of American Civilization, and the second one is the Washington Post, and it's entitled "Trump Campaign Seeks to Head Off Convention Revolt from Its Right Flank." And both of these stories, as you all know, I don't do the full story here in this video because of time and because I want to give people the opportunity to read the full story. You will find links in the Mastodon at mastodon.vtip.me. Let me put up the full not the full screen, but the image of that. That's mastodon.vtip.me/@ what you missed. You'll find the full link so that you can read it. The Atlantic piece, particularly the one by Packer, is very long. It is not a short piece at all. It is an extensive piece. And I'm going to break down what it means, but I want to really focus on one particular part of that story. And this is George Packer. The title is "What Will Become of American Civilization." It's from The Atlantic by George Packer. That was June 10th, 2024. And it goes into a portion of it, and it says Arizona's East Valley is conservative, and so is former GOP Arizona Speaker of the House, Rusty Bowers. That's the guy pictured on the left. Though he calls himself a pinto, a spotted horse, meaning capable of variations. When far-right House members demanded a 30% across-the-board budget cut, he made a deal with Democrats to cut far less and found the experience one of the most liberating of his life. He believes that the environmentalists worship creation instead of its creator, but he drives a Prius as well as a pickup. In the late 2010s, the Arizona Republican Party began to worry Bowers with its growing radicalism. State meetings became vicious free-for-alls, extremists unseated mainstream conservatives. Still, he remained a member in good standing, appearing at events with Donald Trump during the president's re-election campaign, handing out Trump flyers door to door until the morning of Sunday, November 22nd, 2020. Bowers and his wife had just arrived home from church when the Prius blue screen flashed White House. Rudy Giuliani was calling, and soon afterwards, the freshly defeated president came on the line. As Bowers later recalled, there was the usual verbal backslapping, Trump telling him what a great guy he was, and Bowers thanking Trump for helping with his own re-election. So, this is directly from the piece in The Atlantic. But Rusty Bowers became a big figure in the January 6th hearings, and he actually appeared on the hearings. And I'm going to play actually from Bowers' own words from that hearing what transpired. Because Giuliani gets on the phone line. This is from the article. Then Giuliani got to the point. The election in Arizona had been riddled with fraud, piles of military ballots stolen and illegally cast, hundreds of thousands of illegal aliens and dead people voting, gross irregularities at the counting centers. Bowers had been fielding these stories from Republican colleagues and constituents and found nothing credible in them. So now I'm going to play, this is CBS, I'm going to play from his actual testimony, which the man, I find him riveting. Just his testimony and how clear-eyed he is at what is going on. But it speaks to one of several points that George Packer makes in his article. I can't go through all of them again. This is a very long article. He makes 6 or 7 points in it. And I'm going to go over some of those points at the end of this. But I just wanted to focus on this one because this is so significant, because election denialism is a huge thing in Arizona, believe it or not, even still to this day. But let me play this video so that you can hear directly from his own words instead of just quoting from the article.
Speaker Bowers, thank you for being with us today. Before we begin with the questions that I had prepared for you, just to review that statement. He then references a conversation in November 2020.
I'm going to skip ahead through portions of this because I really want to get to the meat of it, so excuse me for that.
During the conversation, he told
anyone, anytime, has said that I said the election was rigged. That would not be true.
And when the former president in his statement today claimed that you told him that he won Arizona, is that also false?
That is also false.
Mr. Bowers, I understand that after the election, and I don't know whether this is the conversation the former president is referring to, but after the election, you received a phone call from President Trump and Rudy Giuliani, in which they discussed the result of the presidential election in Arizona. If you would, tell us about that call and whether the former president or Mr. Giuliani raised allegations of election fraud.
Thank you. My wife and I had returned from attending our church meetings. It was on a Sunday, and we were still in the driveway, and I had received a call from a colleague telling me that the White House was trying to get in touch with her and I, and that she said, please, if you get a call, let's try to take this together. Immediately, I saw that the White House on my Bluetooth was calling, and I took the call and was asked by I would presume, the operator at the White House if I would hold for the president, which I did, and Mr. Giuliani came on first, and niceties, then Mr. Trump, President Trump, then President Trump came on, and we initiated a conversation.
During that conversation, did you ask Mr. Giuliani for proof of these allegations of fraud that he was making?
On multiple occasions, yes.
And when you asked him for evidence of this fraud, what did he say?
He said that they did have proof, and I asked him, do you have names? For example, we have 200,000 illegal immigrants, some large number, 5,000 or 6,000 dead people, etc. And I said, do you have their names? Yes. Will you give them to me? Yes. The president interrupted and said, give the man what he needs, Rudy. He said, I will. And that happened on at least 2 occasions, that interchange in the conversation.
So Mr. Giuliani was claiming in the call that there were hundreds of thousands of undocumented people and thousands of dead people who had purportedly voted in the election?
Yes.
And you asked him for evidence of that?
I did.
And did you ever receive from him that evidence either during the call, after the call, or to this day?
Never.
What was the ask during this call? He was making these allegations of fraud, but he had something or a couple things that they wanted you to do. What were those?
The ones I remember were first that we would hold, that I would allow an official committee at the Capitol so that they could hear this evidence and that we could take action thereafter. And I refused. I said, up to that time, the circus, I called it a circus, had been brewing with lots of demonstrations, both at the counting center, at the Capitol, and other places. And I didn't want to have that in the House. I did not feel that the evidence, granted in its absence, merited a hearing, and I didn't want to be used as a pawn if there was some other need that the committee hearing would fulfill.
So I'm gonna leave it there. This is also, I don't have the link. I may put the link in to the YouTube if it might be useful. I don't know if it will be, but that is basically the situation that Rusty Bowers finds himself in. Again, this guy is a deeply, deeply, deeply conservative guy. This is Arizona. And this is Donald Trump, the guy who he supports and would like to see continue to be president, calling up and basically making these allegations against his own election of what he's in charge of. He is the Speaker of the House right now. And he's putting him in a very serious bind that any other person would probably would have had collapsed under the pressure of this campaign, Rudy Giuliani and all. But Rusty Bowers doesn't. And Rusty Bowers goes through a difficult life after this. This is, again, going back to the Atlantic article by Packer. It says, colleagues in the legislature attacked Bowers on Twitter, and a crowd swarmed the Capitol in December to denounce him. One of the most vocal protesters was a young Phoenix man a month away from world fame as the QAnon shaman. The gloom thickened. Bowers' enemies launched an effort to recall him, with foot soldiers provided by the Trump youth organization Turning Points USA, which is headquartered in Phoenix. The recall failed, but it was an ill omen. That summer, a wildfire in the mountains destroyed Bauer's ranch, taking his library, his papers, and many of his paintings. In 2022, after Bowers testified before the January 6th committee in Washington, D.C., the state party sanctioned him, and another stream of abuse came to his doorstep. Term limited in the House, he ran for a Senate seat just to let the party know that they couldn't bully him out. He was demolished by a conspiracist with Trump's backing. Bauer's political career was over. So there you have it. This is a man deeply conservative, but a part of the establishment. He is a guy who was Speaker of the House, who had supported Trump, and ironically, in this article, Bowers goes on to say that Trump, during the Christmas, I think, of that same year, he calls him up and basically supports what he ultimately did by not joining and not doing what he asked him to do, and said he understood and wished his family a Merry Christmas. But his acolytes came in and did everything they could to destroy him. And it is something that's going to come back around in this Washington Post story, and that is, this is GOP on GOP warfare. This is in Arizona, of what used to be a very conservative, deeply conservative state that is now on the precipice. Well, it's purple right now because you've got much more Democrats. You know, you've got the governor is Democratic, the attorney general, etc. And you've got two legislators in the U.S. Senate who are Democrats. Well, Kristen Sinema was a Democrat and is now independent, but she's not running again. But all in all, this state has swung away from the Republican Party towards the center. And it's all because the Republican Party are at war with one another. Here's the next example, and this to me is even more fascinating. And this is from the Washington Post, Yvette Sanchez and Isaac Arsendoff. And it is entitled, "Trump Campaign Seeks to Head Off Convention Revolt from Its Right Flank." And this was June 22nd, 2024. And it goes on to say, Arizona delegates in the Republican National Convention gathered this month in a Phoenix suburb, showing up to get to know each other and learn about their duties. Part of the presentation included a secret plan to throw the party's nomination of Donald Trump for president into chaos. The instructions did not come from Never Trumpers, hoping to stop the party from nominating a felon when delegates gather in Milwaukee next month. They instead came from an avowed America First believers, hatching a challenge from the right, a plot to release the delegates from their pledge to support Trump, according to people present and briefed on the meeting, slides from the presentation, and private messages obtained by Washington Post. The exact purpose of the maneuver was not clear and left some delegates puzzled and alarmed. People familiar with the meeting who spoke on the condition of anonymity to discuss private conversations said perhaps the intent was to block an undesirable running mate. Most of the dozen of GOP officials or activists interviewed by the Post even venture that the aim may have been to substitute former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn for Trump if the former president is sentenced to prison time. Among some on the far right, suspicions have intensified that the former president has surrounded himself with too many advisors beholden to the deep state. Whatever the goal, the Trump campaign rushed to head off the stunt and replace the delegates. One campaign staffer involved in the cleanup described it as at least two Republicans as an existential threat to Trump's nomination next month. Two people familiar with the conversations told the Post. The campaign and the Arizona delegates reached an agreement that there would be no disruptions at the convention. Still, suspicions lingered about other state delegations. According to a campaign official who wasn't authorized to speak publicly, he declined to elaborate. The 2016 Republican convention briefly descended into a shouting match during a short-lived bid by Trump's Republican opponents to derail his nomination. This time, the Trump campaign has worked quietly and steadily to line up delegates who are unswervingly loyal Trump fans, just in case any of his defeated primary opponents try to disrupt the proceedings. Even so, suspicions have circulated among Trump supporters that covert saboteurs have somehow infiltrated their ranks. At the Georgia GOP convention in May, one would-be delegate withdrew after being accused of having lobbied for Dominion voting systems, a frequent target for false claims of fraud in the 2020 election. Quote, I've had to spend far too much time dealing with intra-party power struggles and local intra-party animosities, Illinois Republican Party Chair Don Tracy said in a resignation letter this month. We have Republicans who would rather fight other Republicans than engage in the hard work of defeating incumbent Democrats by convincing swing voters to vote Republican. The group of delegates that caused alarm with the Trump campaign was led by Shelby Bush, chair of the Arizona delegation and leader of a political action committee she helped create in 2020. The leaders of this group, Shelby Bush and Joe Nagala, are engaged in a multi-state conspiracy to suspend the rules at the National Convention, the Trump campaign said in a memo outlining the plan to recruit new delegates and swear them in instead of the 6 who took part in the meeting to change the rules. Bush's bloc responded by accusing those challenging their status of being part of the, quote, an anti-Trump establishment group seeking to sabotage Trump from within his own campaign and the RNC. Quote, this is an orchestrated effort by our political adversaries using the same vile Democrat tactics on display against our beloved President Trump, her group said in a statement this week. The Arizona grassroots patriots that love our President Donald Trump overwhelmingly voted for our delegation because they know us and our work in Arizona will save our state and our country, our unwavering support for Trump, and they know that they can trust us to vote for Trump even if he's incarcerated. On Thursday, Bush reached an agreement with the campaign that Nagala would step aside, the other delegates could remain, and there would be no revolt on the floor, according to people familiar with the conversations. That resolution diffused the threat, but it left some of the volunteers' replacements feeling jilted for having stepped up to help the campaign and taken heat only to be then cast off. Quote, it was a campaign and RNC driven, said one of the recruited replacements. There was no reason for any of us to do this other than to help the campaign. Campaign political director James Blair moved to smooth things over with a public statement thanking them for their service and praising their loyalty to Trump, while also announcing Bush's commitment to cooperate with the campaign. Meanwhile, the Arizona Republican Party chair wrote to fellow conservatives that the delegation's private chat had become a distraction. Quote, I'm closing this thread, the Post said. It's hurting the ability to function as a team. So there you have it. War within the GOP, war within the Republican Party. They don't trust each other. They are at each other's throats. They are absolutely beholden to Trump. But when given an opportunity, they look for ways to undermine Trump and undermine the RNC. And that's a big deal because remember, Donald Trump is going out, and I'm sure when he gets the nomination officially, he's going to go out and say the Republican Party is the most unified and strongest it's ever been. But it is not. According to this article, you have people in the Republican Party, not just in Arizona, but in Georgia, conspiracy theories up the wazoo. Illinois, the guy who's the head of the Illinois chapter of the Republican Party, he quit because he's tired of having to deal with this. So the infrastructure of the Republican Party is being hollowed out almost like termites to wood over lies and conspiracies. And it's a fascinating thing to look at. So what to make of all of this? Well, I've come up with a couple of conclusions about what's going on in Arizona. And the purpose of this story and of doing this video is two things. The WAPO story tells us something strange is happening, right? There appears to be an attempt to create chaos for the sake of creating chaos around elections, almost like anarchists. Trump no longer appears to have total control of the GOP. In Arizona, this was an attack on Trump from within the GOP. Remember, these guys came out and say, oh, we're pro-Trump, we're pro-Trump, we're pro-Trump. But everything that they're doing appears to be anti-Trump and is trying to find somebody else to replace Trump. And there's no other reason for them to do what they've done, and no other reason for this, this fake attempt to do a primary challenge on this floor, like happened in 2016, except for the fact that the party is not united like Donald Trump claims it is. Contrary to Trump's public statements, the GOP is divided by conspiracy theorists and distrust in one another. And I have said this before in another video, that there are people who are within the party that are administrators, right? There are those people who are actually doing the work of administrating government, which is, a tough job. The Rusty Bowers of the world, for instance. I talked about in another video how in Alabama, challenging voting rights in districts and all this kind of stuff was holding up their ability to hold elections. So part of what's going on here is that the whole function of government in Republican states, in Republican places, are being taken apart and are being gummed up. The works is being, you cannot administrate the government's work because of conspiracy theory and distrust in one another. And then finally, some believe that the grifters are doing this to make money off of the chaos. Questioning the election has become a profitable business for some. People may not remember this, but the voter fraud nonsense. There was a company that came out of seemingly nowhere who had no experience in voter fraud or in counting ballots. They claimed to be a security company, but they came out of nowhere and charged Arizonans millions of dollars to do a recount, and that recount ended up with Joe Biden having more votes instead of having less because of all of this fraud. So somebody's making money, and it's almost ironic for Trump to be the victim, and the Republican Party that's behind Trump to be basically the victim of a bunch of people who are scam artists, basically. The Atlantic story is important. George Packer's story is important, is because it goes into why this is happening in Arizona. But I think you could probably broaden this out to other places. But it's, again, lies, lies, and more lies. Distrust. There is a distrust in government, all government. They're all the deep state, right? If they don't like what they're doing, they're the deep state, including administrators of the state, and they're at an all-time high within the Republican Party. Remember, if you cannot function as an administrator, if you can't get things done as an administrator, and during the time where there's nothing, we're basically at peace, what happens when you have a serious pandemic again? And nobody can trust anybody. No one can get things done because everybody believes that the other guy is the enemy. The second thing is that climate change is transforming Arizona. I didn't talk about this, but this is a key part of Packer's piece, is that climate change in the Midwest, Arizona, Nevada, parts of California, Texas, they're under a heat dome where temperatures are reaching 100, 110 degrees, 111 degrees for a sustained period of time, not just one day, but for weeks on end. And people are getting burnt and severely injured by the heat. And there is fear within Phoenix that the city won't exist in the future, according to Packer. There is a real concern that Arizona, this portion of Arizona, Phoenix, Arizona, could become unlivable because of the high temperatures. And this is something that, again, the climate change scientists have said is going to happen. Temperatures are going to get so high in certain areas that it's going to become uninhabitable. And the Republican Party for decades has been calling that all a lie. Homelessness exposes other fundamental issues like NIMBYism. This is happening in California, as well as putting municipalities against the state government, right? So again, we go into how can you run a state when it's at war with itself? And this is not exclusive, by the way, to Arizona. As I stated, California is having a similar problem with the homeless problem. Homeless problem is going to become even more exacerbated because of the natural disasters that are going to happen because of climate change. And this NIMBYism and this attempt by people who have property and have land not wanting to have anything built in their yard is only going to hurt and exacerbate the overall problem with homelessness, which is going to become a health problem in the state. Water is a problem in Arizona. It always has been. And Packer goes into with Bowers. Bowers has moved out of politics and into the water business. And water in the West, Nevada, Utah, California, of course, water wars are a real thing, and there's a big problem. And finally, the GOP in general is beset by conspiracy theorists, fraudsters, and is splitting the party in two. Again, I go back to the article in the Washington Post where Republicans suspect that these guys who are causing these problems in the elections and throwing all kind of conspiracy theories up about elections, they are anarchists, and they are there primarily to make a little bit of money off of the chaos and off of the crazy. It is what we're seeing in the Republican Party, and the million-dollar question for me is, can the Republican Party fall apart and not take the rest of us with it? Is this thing that's happening in the Republican Party an existential threat to all of America, or is it just change that's happening in the Republican Party that could probably end after it goes through what it goes through and a new party is born? What that new party looks like and what it is going to be the thing to watch at and to look out for. So while everybody else is concerned about Donald Trump in the election and that Donald Trump lose the election, my concern is not that he loses the election, but that Donald Trump's losing the election furthers the birth of whatever this new party that the Republican Party is going to become, and whether his loss becomes the straw that broke the camel's back that eliminates, any sensibility within the Republican Party, and we have, God knows what come out of that. So I don't like to end on a doom and gloom sort of thing, but it's something to look at, and I hope anybody watching this and viewers of this video as well as this channel, keep an eye on not Trump in the election, but what is going on in the Republican Party. I will do more videos that give us some insight as to what's happening in Republicanville. Thank you for watching today's video, and as always, you will see me on the next one. Hey there, fantastic viewers. Eric Darnley Small here, and I hope you're loving today's episode of What You Missed. You've reached the end of today's show, but don't worry, there's more show coming up. If you're watching this on YouTube, please click the bell so that you'll be notified when more content is available. You can also help the channel by clicking the like and subscribe buttons. It helps the YouTube algorithm find new viewers so that I can keep bringing you all this incredible content you enjoy. But wait, there are more ways to support the show. You can make a contribution through the show's PayPal, which goes a long way in helping produce even better content for you. And consider becoming a part of our growing community by joining our Mastodon site at mastodon.vtip.me/@whatyoumissed for more engaging discussions and exclusive updates. And here's something you won't want to miss. Mark your calendars for our live show streaming on YouTube and stream.vtip.me Monday mornings, 10:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Your support means the world to me, and together we're making What You Missed the best it can be. Thanks for being a part of my journey.